All right, so just reviewing our culture for the group. We want everyone to bring their full presence as always, and respect for everyone that has joined and the determination to do the work that is being asked of us. And remember, in our study, always this quality of humility comes up, and two things we should always try to remember is what good others have done for us, what bad we have maybe done to others, and that will always keep us in the mindset of wanting to improve. And the two things we should always try to, as best possible, to forget are what bad others have done for us. And I always preface that by saying maybe not necessarily the action that happened, but the emotions and the feelings that came out of those actions. And then what good we have done for others. That's also really important to try to stay in a grounded state and always want to continue to assist others. All right, so our invocation of giving thanks to our teachers and all those that have joined. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangu Langete Grim Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sunda Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So as always, I was born without knowledge, and my spiritual teacher opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my sincere respects unto them. I offer my sincere respects unto my spiritual teachers. Their grace turns the dumb into eloquent speakers and enables the lame to cross mountains. And finally, I offer my sincere respects to all those that have joined the seekers of the divine, who can fulfill the desires of everyone and who are full of compassion for all living beings. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. We were just recapping the amazing retreat that we had over the weekend, and Tiffany had a chance to come. I was hoping that Stacy was going to be here also to share some experiences, but it was really incredible, and I really can't wait. Oh, and Stacy, as we speak about her, she arrives. Hey, Stacy. We were just mentioning that we were recapping the retreat, and I was hoping you were going to be here to share something about it. And oh, and Ida's joining us. Perfect. So yeah, we had a really great time, and we're all looking forward to part 2 in the springtime, and we'll get others to share. So just to recap where we have been in terms of where we've been. So we were discussing last week, we're in this section of the book now of the Dark Night of Yoga and the Dark Night of Soul. And we're in this section of karma, and karma refers to skill in action, or that's one of the ways we can understand karma to be. And this is very much trying to improve the choices we make in life. And Krishna, he describes to Arjuna 3 elements of these, what it requires to make skill, like have skill in our different choices and actions. And so we're going to be reviewing the first of the 3 parts, but the first of the 3 parts, just to recap, one was bring true to our nature. The second was letting go of the fruits. And the third was making work is our worship. So making whatever we do in our day-to-day life an offering for a higher purpose. So these were the 3 elements of a skillful action. And so today, we're just going to move through. We're going to focus on this first element. And for those of you that are following along in the book, just so you guys can get to the right spot, we are located in, so it's the first part now, or it's chapter 8. We're at the start of chapter 8, be true to your own nature. That's where we are in the book for those that are trying to, who have the book to follow along. And so this is a really, I mean, did anyone have a chance to read this section of the book? Yeah. Yeah. So Paul, did you have any opening reflections or comments? And if you don't, it's okay. Oh, you're on mute, Paul. Paul, you're on mute.
Yes, I just unmuted. No, so I have a number of areas highlighted. I absolutely love delving into this book, and I can certainly go to the highlights. But by carrying our action in accord with one's own nature, one doesn't go wrong. Like, I don't know. I think the older I get, the more I try to be true to myself. And actually, sometimes, and most of the times, that's good, and some of the times I'm running into issues when the people around me aren't appreciating my uniqueness. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I'm still being unique to myself. I'm just not always being heard in some environments, and that I find a bit of a struggle. But in terms of the way I'm living, I'm doing it. I just don't know that I'm doing it yet harmoniously enough. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I always find that one of the litmus tests of our progress is sometimes it may not always jive with everyone else, but it's also there's that second element of this skillful action is we just have to sometimes let go, right? And I think that detachment is also important as we evolve as well, because we may not get everyone's approval and support. So I remember I mentioned this is a very unique instruction that Krishna gives, because he talks about it twice in the Bhagavad Gita. And this is, I wanted to show both quotes today that are really describing this point that we're trying to get across here in this first part. The occupation given to you, though imperfect, is better than another's, even perfectly done. Defeat on one's path is better, for another's path is dangerous. And again, this is really getting at the point that we were talking about. Instead of, the world right now is trying to pull us all, in masses towards certain ways of life. And I was just reflecting with Stacy and Tiffany on the weekend, is that this is one of the reasons why we have so many people changing careers, multiple times in their life, is because they're in fact sometimes trying to do something that was either popular or, they were pushed to do, and they weren't really acknowledging, what their strengths were, and maybe perhaps choosing careers or work around that. And then the second quote, the second place where Krishna mentions this again, there's only two instructions that he repeats twice, and this is one of them, is 1847, the occupation given to you, though imperfect, is better than another's, even perfectly done. Doing your natural duty never brings sin. And so again, the same theme, pretty much the same thing said in 335, but now at the very end of the Gita, he repeats it again. So just wanted to highlight these two specific verses, because this really speaks to the point of what we are trying to get across in this first section. So, exactly, I just wanted to start off with the question, and we can do this as a group today, but everyone just reflecting on what prevents us being true to our nature. I think that's very, it's an important thing to discuss, to try to figure out what is potentially blocking us, what we see potentially blocking others. And so does anyone want to comment or share on this question? So what prevents us, or what stops us?
I have a comment, Ricken.
Yeah, please, Stacey.
So I'm exploring this a lot because it's part of what's in my book that I'm writing. I think that there was something, Tony Robbins talked about this in The Ultimate Edge, and when I was listening to that audio program, it was like something clicked. He was talking about the concept of a blueprint, right? Like we're moving toward that we think our life is going to be like kind of this blueprint that we have before us, and we may or may not actually really realize that that's what we think, right? But it's something we just start to internalize, and that blueprint oftentimes is what others think of us, right? Like when Jay Shetty, talked about you got three options, right? You could either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure, right? It's like you end up choosing a profession, or or living kind of this expectation that others have of you. And I think it takes some time, and like you said, Paul, just some kind of a realization and a decision. Hey, I'm going to be true to myself, and even knowing what that even means, right? That takes quite a bit of time to actually start to break through that, and to get to a different, not even really a blueprint, but like a lighthouse, like a vision for your life.
Yeah, no, thank you. Stacy, what you were saying was just ringing up true to, if you remember the first quote in Jay's book, he quotes it in a couple interviews, but this the layers of ourselves. If you remember this quote by Charles Horton Cooley, it's I'm not who I'm not who you think I am. I'm not who I think I am. I am who I think you think I am, right?
Yes.
And it was such a powerful quote, because it really, speaks to, the perception we have ourselves, the perception other people have ourselves, and then what we think other people think of us, right?
Yes.
It's it's a really important thing, but thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any comments to share? I think Avni is just joining us. Avni, we're just talking about we're reflecting on this question of skillful action, but the reflection question is, what prevents us from being true to our nature? We're in the chapter, we're just starting chapter 8 in our review.
Wonderful, thank you, thank you.
Anyone else have any comments of what prevents us from being true to ourselves?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Aida. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. I think one of the impacts that has us not be true to ourselves, or can have a conflict within ourselves, is our environment. So fear, or also things that we can't control. So Stacey, you spoke about the blueprint. You have a blueprint about your life, about what you think your world is and what you think your plans are, and then there's changes in the environment which totally shakes that up, and you think that blueprint is your life. You think that is who you, and the blueprint is a reflection of yourself. But the environment can shake it up. And I guess, I'm speaking from, if some of you have seen my post, I'm experiencing about, from what is happening here, and the environment we're here at the moment. And I'm not only seeing it in my life, I'm seeing this environmental interruption in so many other people's lives. And what I'm seeing is fear, uncertainty, anxiety. So you think this is who you are, this is who you know yourself to be. And then there is such a huge interruption where you lose control of your life, you lose control of everything that you know to be the truth, that it has you go into conflict within yourself. It has you question yourself, because the environment, the interruption of the environment, again, I say that is out of control, has you question yourself. This is who I know myself to be, and this is how I've operated, but it no longer applies. It no longer applies, which is really, it's an interesting, it's very, very interesting, something I've never experienced, and I'm finding hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people are experiencing that right now.
Yeah, no, thank you, Aida. It's a really important, it's really important what you're sharing in terms of the challenge that everyone's going through in being true to themselves, right? There's so much external pressure. We can even which is a very controversial topic, but even just on the point of people being pushed for to be or not to be vaccinated, right? This is really polarizing all of society and really pushing people. And without getting too much into it, my kind of larger outlook on it is that what is our purpose in this, to exist in this world. It's the purpose of our life is not to be or not to be vaccinated. That's kind of a detail, but the way it's being constructed right now in life is that this is the be all and end all, right? So Avantika, please.
Can I just add on that? Just for some of you who don't know what's happening in Australia, it actually no longer, there's a medical apartheid happening. And unfortunately, the mainstream media is not reflecting what is actually happening. There is a medical apartheid happening based on what you've spoken about, but it's a lot more deeper and extreme. We have our government here who's trying to push a bill called the pandemic legislation. And if this succeeds, he will have more power than Hitler ever did. So it's very, very scary. There will be political arrests if you speak against the government. There's so much censorship happening, whether it's person's WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. People will get arrested for even their attitude. So I just want people to, if you're listening to mainstream media, please try and get onto other media and see what is actually happening here. So I just wanted to bring some, it's not just about vaxxed or not being vaxxed. What is happening globally is really about human rights. And it is such an interruption. It is beyond what globally at the same time, I think as human beings, we have ever experienced historically. So just needed to add that in. So yeah, guys, keep an eye on what's on Australia. Don't listen to the mainstream media.
Thanks, Ida. Avantika, please.
Hi, thanks everyone. So now that I've listened to what Ida's saying, I do want to add something a little later in terms of, my observation on different countries and how they've handled this whole thing and about perception and things like that. But anyway, so the first part of the question. So I love these reflections because they force me to, I think that's with Hinduism, it's all about, rather than commandments, it's more about tark and with questioning and then, seeking what's coming to you as a result of that. So what came to me when you asked the question, what's keeping you from being true to your highest nature, your true nature? I think the thing that comes to me is that there needs to, all human experience, it's like with anything in the universe, an experience of fusion and then, what's the opposite of that? Fission, right? So fission and fusion, fission and fusion. And in the process of fusion, there's a lot of unification, a lot of, identifying with what the collective is, right? So you're becoming part of the collective narrative and part of the collective experience in which you have to normalize to the collective nature. And then in fission, there's a lot of individuation, right? So there's like coming to who you are and what your narrative is and what your goals are, what your true nature, your highest nature is. So one of the things that, and in physics, in quantum, we have this thing about systems, and every system will try and achieve equilibrium at a set point. So people feel this when they try to lose weight, is that they do a lot, they lose weight, and then their body, goes back to the weight it thinks it should be at. That's the set point that the body has, and the medical professionals here will know. But every system has this. So in a collective, when we're part of our family, our communities, our organizations, our, the world at large, we are kept from being at our true nature or our highest nature, sometimes because there's a set point that has been defined by the collective, and we kind of, in our unification process, have accepted, adopted, and agreed to be in alignment with that. And at some point in our late 20s, mid 30s, early 40s, we start to individuate, and we're like, no, that's not my set point, and I want to kind of rise above that and see what is my highest. Livia asked this question earlier in the series, and I had recommended this book, Jonathan Livingston's Seagull. And that, I think, is such a beautiful allegory for how this set point, all the seagulls believed that their job was only to fly to a certain level so that they could feed themselves. And then there was this Jonathan Livingston seagull who felt that, no, because I have wings, I must experience the highest flight. And he was ostracized. And I wrote that in the chat comment to Paul, that in the world of fugitives, the one who takes the opposite direction initially is always seen as being the one who's running away. So these are all the things that came, that it's really about that dance between the set point that the collective has and a hypnosis when we are identifying with that. And then when we start to individuate and define our own set point, which is what our spiritual awareness, awakening, realization, actualization journey is about identifying with the highest, narrative that we can align with, away from a thing. So that is, what really keeps us from being at our truest nature is everything that we feel will separate us from the collective is what keeps us. And everything which connects us with ourselves is what keeps us close to our truest nature. So that's been my experience. I did have another comment for, what's happening in Australia and around the world, around the thing, but I don't want to hog the conversation, so maybe we can have the conversation later.
Thanks, Avantika. I was really appreciating the kind of the timeline of, what we could see, maybe our evolution, but just in general, how people go through their teens and 20s, and then eventually how things can evolve. You don't see necessarily 20-year-olds changing, let's say, for example, a job, but when you get into your 30s and 40s, when people are, again, like you were saying, trying to individuate, is very much more of a common, thing to see, right? So yeah, no, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments on what prevents us from, the question was, what prevents us from being true to our nature?
Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Yeah,
Christina.
it's a very interesting reflections, and it's so true to every side of what I additionally maybe thought, and partially what's like Aida mentioned, the blueprint or something like this. It's actually also this. It always comes to yourself at the end of the day, and I suppose that's. By doing anything, you are just connected to some results or attached to some results, or to what if you do your, I don't know, the best scenario, you are doing everything and you are just expecting some results to come, and then they are not here, where you are starting really questioning everything. If also if it's somebody else, or is it on some steps are looking at yourself, if everything is really like you had in plan, if it's still correct, so, and everything. So it's probably this attachments to results wherever you go. If you start something, if you have an intention, and by doing that you expect some results, what should have happened, or where you should move. It's just like it's probably for me the reflection that, and sometimes it's a time to let loose like all that and to rethink again. So it's just only thought. Yeah.
Thank you, Christina, for sharing. There were 2 points that I wanted to reflect on this question of what prevents us. The first was the ideas and the conceptions we get from our parents in terms of what areas we should focus on in life. And we can see so many times we hear about children potentially pursuing careers or going in directions that they really one, they maybe wanted to please their parents. Two, they got really encouraged or pushed by their parents. And I was just thinking to myself that, you know, an important aspect of being parent, because the children are basically then following and trying to fulfill the attachments that the parents have. And just to be even aware of that, you know, that we have certain attachments and we sometimes can push it on to our children, and just being mindful of that, you know, can really change sometimes the whole trajectory of their, you know, of their early years, and sometimes help them try to avoid their struggles. That was the first point that came to mind in terms of maybe what's preventing us to be your true nature. The second point that came to me is, obviously we know that social media now is such a strong driving factor. And I was thinking, Stacey and I were talking on the weekend about how we still need to evolve so much when it comes to social media. I will say that I'm still a little bit of a dinosaur, but I was thinking to myself, and one of the reasons that I probably am a little bit more behind is because I actively choose not to spend that much time on it because of how influenced it can be. But how can, you know, the question that has come to mind in this reflection is like, how do we utilize social media in a way that we can still be true to our nature and enhance, you know, like how can it enhance us rather than, you know, deter us? And, you know, the whole point of these teachings in the Gita that Krishna speaks about is not this aspect of retreating and running away, but how they can be engaged for a greater good, right? That's really one of the key, you know, teachings in this. And so it was just coming to me, you know, we have so many, like we have a chase for prestige and security, and, you know, potentially, you know, we're prevented sometimes by what our parents want from us or close friends, what's popular, what's on social media. But I was just thinking, the point that I was just trying to kind of come forward with is how we can still, you know, be true to our nature, and how maybe social media can assist us in doing that. So that was just the other point that I wanted to put forward in this. If anyone had any comments, feel free to share. Or anything else that they maybe wanted to add. Otherwise, we can move on.
Yeah, so I think on this one, it takes some time and discipline to, you know, not, I mean, just the way that social media is, I mean, it's designed for you to be like, oh, did I get another like or something like that, right? Or did someone comment? You know, it's those dopamine hits, right, that it takes advantage of. But I think with time, it gets easier to just let it be, right? And just have designated, you know, a few times a day or something, you check it, and then you don't really think about it as much. But it does take time to kind of overcome that psychology that's just wired in there, right? Yeah. But I have found, as I've been on the journey of, you know, probably a little over a year or so of writing things that are intended to be inspirational, uplifting, you know, people do gravitate toward that because oftentimes there's not that available elsewhere, right? Or people are posting for different reasons. So if your intentions are pure in that, I think people do follow it, but it just takes, there's an adjustment period, right? Where I kind of felt it kind of took over and I had to recalibrate, but I do find that it has happened now, right? Where I'm able to kind of, you know, use it for good and just leave the bad.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think this, you know, this element of it takes practice. I mean, even the first step of, I mean, for me, it was very transformational when you can leave your phone or whatever you may have. I don't really use social media, but even things like WhatsApp and stuff, if you can even just leave that away from yourselves at the beginning of the day and not leave your phone in your bedroom, that for me was still like a very big, you know, it leads to a whole different shift in how you approach your day. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and move on from this reflection question. So the second point that we wanted to bring up that was really important, or the kind of one of the ethos, and we're going back now to even things Simon's mentioning, things from back in the book of Dharma, but this very much this being true to your nature aligns with truth, the principle of truth. And again, this is what he comments, if you remember from the book, and also in the book of Dharma, he mentions this story of the palliative care nurse and her being around many people who were coming to the end of their life. and she asks all these individuals, like, what is something that, what they wish they could have done, right? And she and universally the reply to the question is that they wish that they had the courage to live a life true to themselves, not what like others expected from them. And that's very interesting because, again, Simon's pointing the light on how, in fact, reflecting on our mortality and how the limited time we have, that can be, in fact, a push and a accelerator to help us align with being a little bit more true to our nature. And I thought that was a really, really, really powerful example in asking, surveying, because again, when you get older, elderly, you've lived a lot of life, you've seen a lot of things, there's a lot of wisdom that's to be shared, but that this was a very reoccurring and common theme, is this desire and wish to live a life true to oneself rather than what others expected. So that was a really important point here that was, again, brought up by the palliative care nurse. He comments on Bronnie Ware's experience of taking care of the elderly and those that were leaving. So that was one element of truth that was shared in this chapter. The second, just going back to recap, the other aspect of truth was accepting reality. And we talked about how to be able to accept reality, in fact, acceptance here is a powerful factor for our growth and for our overall growth, because if we can try to better see things as they are rather than, many times tainted by our biases and colored vision that we have, that in fact we'll be able to respond more effectively and efficiently in life. And so the second element of truth, with, again, is going back to, being true to our nature, accepting reality is really important. And I think for ourselves, when it comes to being true to ourselves, acknowledging not only our strengths, but also our weaknesses is really important, because then we don't have to do all the comparing that we do, because we know what our strengths are. We're very secure in them to be able to move forward. And at the same time, when we acknowledge our weaknesses, then if we're trying to improve those, we hang around those and we create company with those that our weaknesses are someone else's strengths. And I think just having, those very much clear and well understood within ourselves is another factor in accepting reality. And then the third element we discussed was alignment of our thoughts, words, and actions. And one of the themes that we talked about throughout the weekend when we were on our retreat was trying to increase the company of those with high integrity and high character, because that, in fact, is what is going to not only just inspire respect in our mind, but also genuine respect coming from the heart, and which again leads to that opening up of the heart as well. So really, for all of us, trying to align our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And if people recall previously, we've gone into exercises where we've thought about, potentially where our thoughts don't meet our words, and sometimes where our words don't meet our actions. And again, that alignment, and the word that we often use is congruence, is really important to achieve that integrity. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts to share on any of these last 3 points? Please, Avantika.
Yeah, much earlier in my life, I used to always get polarized into one opinion or the other. And I was always surrounded and attracting people who either had my opinion or had a very polarized opinion to mine. So initially, of course, it started at the level of the family unit as to, what career choices should be, etc., what success looks like, what cultural practices should be, etc. Then I went on to the organization level as to what power distance looks like, what is the role of the leader, what is the role of the subordinate, and how competitive to get with people and how that looks. And then, religious issues, and then, cultural issues, and then cross-national issues. So as your exposure, your age goes up, you kind of, tie in with all of this. And then I used to keep finding myself getting into these heated arguments with people, because to me, it was like, oh, this is the truth. My truth is the truth, and their truth is just wrong because it's different from my truth. I think what I've learned to understand, this comes to your point over here, which is like accepting reality and integrity and all of that. But one of the things that really becomes, so, and it's like a switch that gets turned on one sudden day, you're like, hey, you know what, this person believes something completely different from what this person believes. And they both have the truth is neither here nor here, but it's somewhere here. So it's kind of, like learning to neutralize polarization is really where truth lies. Someone asked me, what is good, what is dark, what is light, what is all of that? And I had to really think about it, because what my definition of it might be someone else's definition of the opposite. And then what I realized is wherever you are polarized to something else, where you believe those are all the bad guys and these are all the good guys, or that is all wicked and that is where it's not truth. There is no truth there. The truth always comes in a point where it is accepting of the whole perspective. Everyone's perspective is being valid, not in the polarization. So if you were to kind of think of the anti-vaxxers and the vaxxers, or the liberals and the conservatives, or, we just find the world so divided because everyone believes that this is exactly absolute where the truth is. And then you have a complete set of other people who believe, no, the exact absolute truth is here. But the fact is that both of them are representatives of the whole truth. And so one of the aspects of identifying true nature and integrity and truth, I think, is also about identifying within yourself, where am I really polarized? Where do I believe that something is absolutely, like if I'm the hero, then that is the villain, that kind of, instead of like coming from there into a place of, hey, you know what, in the middle of this is really what the whole thing is. And I think Buddha also kind of really said this really beautifully when he tried the really extreme versions of finding and seeking truth. And then he realized that your distance from your true self is literally zero. You're always a nanosecond away from your true self. So if you feel you've got to like struggle very hard and go very far, that is really, you're not really on the right path. But when you take the point of just connecting with yourself and being okay where you are, and understanding you're effortlessly exactly where you're supposed to be, and that is the truth, then that under a tree one fine day you could achieve enlightenment. Whereas you could go through years and years of penance and fasting and all sorts of extreme things. So I just want to bring that point across.
Wow, that's a great point, Avantika. There was two things that I wanted to reflect on that comment. One was that there is, I really do, this polarization that's created in the world. I think one of the reasons it's done is because it's easy, and as we were talking about, integrating and exploring the gray area it takes a lot more time and effort, and it takes a lot more capacity to think, and also to zoom out and look more broad-mindedly. So I think the polarization of anything, as you were saying, I think it exists because it's just an easy way to put either things or individuals in boxes, right? And I really agree that exploring the gray is really, it takes time, but also I think when we explore that gray, it's a sign of maturity as well, but it's not always a path that's taken by many. The other point that I wanted to make was just in reference to what we were saying is that I think the acceptance of exploring, just whatever may, looking at the whole, I think it also must be complemented by looking at universal principles of truth, because otherwise then everybody's opinion is right. And there's still, I think that element of discrimination is still important. So I think our discrimination should always be based on, those eternal principles that have existed for many years, because otherwise we're always making up our own, we say, we always talk about kind of following our own truth, but what we may, feel is following our own truth may be very misaligned from what is, what actually is. So just the point that I wanted to make as to contrast what you were saying. Tiffany?
I think it was Rumi that said, out in the field beyond right and wrong, I'll meet you there. And so it's that ability to get outside of it, like Avantika said, that where is this right and wrong, but we have to be outside the field, and we've learned discernment. And I think that's it, right? It's that ability to discern and to just observe the situation as it is. So this is great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Just moving on to the next few points that I want to make before we can read a couple of sections of the book was, I went through this section and I was trying to pull out signs that we are necessarily like fighting our nature. And these are the things, some of the few points that came up. Was the first point is we don't feel energetic or enthusiastic as to what we are doing or necessarily approaching. I thought that was a very important point we can always touch upon and ask ourselves if there's energy and enthusiasm. The second is continuously watching the clock. So if everyone remembers, there was a story where Simon takes up a job as someone who bags, he takes packages of chips and he puts them in a box, and that's his job. And he lasted for 3 days. And he said, even if I was, he's like, I was looking at the clock and every minute seemed like half an hour. So again, continually watching the clock, I thought was a sign, perhaps potentially we're fighting our nature. The third was large sums of money that cannot change your mind. So the other point that he had made in this was that, even if I was paid 2 or 3 times the amount to do this simple job, he's like, not having that is really, is what's going to make me happy. So I was just thinking about that point, that a lot of times there is finances is what carries us to continue to do what we're doing for a long time. And that if we get to a point where even the greatest sum is not going to help us, then, it might be an opportunity for us to look elsewhere. And then 3 more things that came to me. Well, I didn't change the name of that slide, but it does not feel natural. So there should be a sense of ease to what we are trying to carry out and do. It doesn't mean that everything necessarily has to be easy, but that with a considerable amount of practice, that it's not always a fight. This third point, this fifth point that I came across, that signs that we might be fighting our nature, is a lingering sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction. That was another point that came up in this chapter, that when we are going against or fighting our nature, that there will always sometimes be this lingering sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction. And I definitely can say that I've experienced that at different points in time as well. And then the last point that came across to me in this section was high levels of validation from others are required to keep us going. And I thought that because at the end of this chapter, it had noted that even we can, if we're really aligned with our nature and what we're doing, we can do it. It doesn't have to necessarily be high paying. We can do it at all times of the day. And finally, this point that was made is that whether it's met with great outward success or even only limited validation, it is still highly satisfying. And it ends with what we do becomes its own reward. And so these were some of the points that I was able to extract from the whole section. And to me, again, the section of being true to our nature, these were some of the jewels that I thought that Simon shared, that we can, which I think are very tangible and practical, that we can use for ourselves, but also potentially share with others. Anyone have any thoughts or comments that they wanted to share on any of these points? All right. we have two people that raise their hand. Is Tiffany, is your hand still raised from before? Could just unmute. All right, and Avantika, please.
Yeah, just one thing to add from outside of the book. So I'm a healer, and one of the healing my own self from a lot of things, as all of us are, but also like, helping other people heal. And one of the things which I find which keeps people really separate from their true nature is that they project, so they feel they have created certain divisions or fragmentations within their soul of certain parts of themselves that they have distanced or separated themselves from because of trauma, because of various things. So one of the clues as to know that you are not in alignment with your true nature is when you see that you have projected that part onto people in your environment. You're attracting a lot of people who come up like that. So there are two things that we always project. One is our light side. So if we're surrounded by people who have this amazing magnetism and light, and then we're looking at them saying, wow, they're doing so much. There's actually a part of ourselves that we have separated ourselves from and projected to them. Second is our dark side. So if there's certain fears, certain things, aspects from our life that were traumatic, maybe in a family or in our own self, maybe we acted a certain way. So because nobody is an absolute. If you even think of Valmiki, who is a great Maharishi, he started off as a dacoit. Or there's this book, La Miserable, which starts off with a person who's a petty thief and then goes on to become very evolved. So everyone has a past that they're ashamed of in some way, some shame, something, guilt, that you kind of then separate from yourself and project it. Until that integration happens and you're able to accept that everything that you are continuously magnetizing your life, you see a lot of people who project a lot of the parts of their true identity onto their environment. And so some part of this thing, I'm going very esoteric over here, but one amazing part of aligning with your true nature is about looking around and seeing who is around you. And if it's people that you feel very separated from, or if it's people you feel very highly connected to, then chances are that there's a part of your true nature that they're reflecting back to you. So that mirror thing of the universe being a pure mirror, look at what the mirror is showing you, and you will understand where you are either feeling aligned with or separated from your true nature. That's just something I want to bring up.
Yeah, really great point. Avantika, I was just thinking about that a little bit more. So what I was gathering is that when we're around people that kind of share the same light that we're sharing, that's also a mirror as to what our true nature is, but also the flip side is our dark side, things that we don't like about ourselves. When we start seeing that around us, that also being, would you say, incongruent with our true nature?
Yes, it definitely talks about some unresolved part within yourself. So I'm not recommending that, if someone is surrounded by cheats and liars, that you are a cheat and a liar. But you have to absolutely question, why am I attracting and magnetizing so many, terrible experiences? So what is around me which is unresolved? Do I have an unhealed past? Do I have certain parts of myself that I believe I'm a liar and a cheat? It could be something very simple. Maybe you had a very destructively critical parent who kept telling you're a bad person, or whatever. There's so many things that we get conditioned. There are things about our sexuality, there are things about our abundance, there are things about our success levels that we're judged for, about our body that we're judged for, and we tend to internalize those beliefs about ourselves. And that's what we project. So if we feel that we are being judged or being, not disrespected or being lied to or betrayed, it is because there's something unresolved where we are not in alignment with our true nature. Because our true nature, as you said, is just our soul. Our soul is pure, it is unfettered, it is just in love, it is in peace. So anywhere we are, not in alignment with that experience, it means that there is something to heal inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking that this point that you're bringing up, that to me, it also speaks to the principle of compassion, that if we can acknowledge within ourselves, as we've talked about before, there's kind of Radhan Swami was saying in a previous talk that we watched, a good dog and a bad dog. And whatever we choose to feed, that's what's going to grow. And so that at least acknowledging within ourselves that there are these two sides here. And then when we see that in others, it's, again, this understanding of, we should hate the disease, but not the diseased person, right?
You're absolutely right. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've found that what some people, mistake in the spiritual path is that they're going to bypass and they only seek the light and they completely ignore the dark side of the light warrior or the light seeker. And that's why we turn this book club discussing the dark night of the soul. And the soul unnecessarily is not good or bad. And, dark night is also not bad. But these are just opportunities for us to understand that anything which feels separate or which feels that, there's a negative emotion associated with, a negative thought form associated with, is not in alignment with our true nature. And the process of awakening, alignment, and, coming in harmony with our true nature is really about integrating that. So exactly what you're feeding, just what I love what you said in the good dog and the bad, what you're feeding is really what you will see this thing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, such a powerful, thanks for this reflection, Avantika. It's a really good one just to note and take away, to think about. It could potentially uncover some blind spots with the people we surround ourselves with. So it's really powerful. Thank you so much. I just wanted to read a couple of comments in the chat box. Hiba was talking about neutralizing polarization and how that's a beautiful concept. Tiffany was commenting on Rumi, out in the field, beyond right and wrong, I'll meet you there. Thank you for that. Stacy was just sharing a video from Heineken on polarization. That's really interesting. Is it a long video, Stacy?
No, it's like 4 minutes, but I can also
perfect.
put it in the chat. It's super powerful.
Okay.
Even though it's a beer company.
No, that's it sounds great. And then the last point, Hiba wanted to share something, but we'll do that towards the end. I just wanted to take a few minutes to read from a couple of sections of this chapter before we head off. We're going to pick up right into section 1, but we won't start right at the beginning. But basically, what's this story is about Simon encountering another lawyer that he's worked with who's climbed the ladder. And I'll just start off by reading midway through section 1. I made friends with Chris. He was scheduling his business meetings around his job interviews. I can't tell you how much my spirit has died since I started working here. He told me, it feels like a slaughterhouse of the soul. A slaughterhouse of the soul, that phrase surprised me. I would be reminded of it a few years later. When would you, what would you like to do? I asked Chris. I love plants. I was going to be a botanist, but my father convinced me that it was a bad idea. Botanists struggle to pay their bills. Like so many, Chris was in a profession that didn't suit his nature. Harried and fatigued, he would get through Mondays knowing that everyone around him was equally miserable. Chris complained regularly that he wasn't being paid enough. The others of his standing at similar firms were paid more. That colleagues advanced ahead of him because they had connections or navigated the firm's politics better. I don't know what happened to Chris. We didn't stay in touch, but the phrase he used remained with me: slaughterhouse of the soul. No matter how well paid the job, I knew I didn't want to end up in a slaughterhouse of the soul. Does anyone want to read from section 2, like starting from there?
Is it starting with rather than just care? Is that the next?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Rather than just care for her dying patients, longtime palliative nurse Bronnie Ware thought she could maybe learn from them too. After all, these were people at the end of their life. Awareness of our own mortality has a way of altering our perspective on life, of helping us see what we so easily miss in the frenetic, feverish rush of everyday existence. Bronnie began questioning her patients. What went really well in your life? Do you have any regrets? Is there anything you would do differently? To Bronnie's surprise, there was one regret that kept coming up again and again. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that it's better to strive and even struggle on your own path than to succeed on the path of another. Krishna goes further. It's better to follow your own path, even if you perish doing so, than to follow the path someone else expects of you and succeed in doing so perfectly. Arjuna is a warrior by nature. In his dark night of the soul, he wants to give up being a warrior. It's a difficult path. He would rather choose a different calling, maybe that of a wandering monk. But Krishna teaches him about the importance of being true to one's nature. By carrying out action in accord with one's own nature, one doesn't go wrong. One should never abandon the type of action one is born to perform, Arjuna, even if it has faults. All undertakings come with some fault, just as fire comes with smoke. So by carrying our action in accord with one's own nature, one doesn't go wrong. That's a powerful statement.
Thank you. And then I wanted to move forward to the beginning of section 4. If does someone wanted to read the beginning of section 4 in this chapter?
I could do that.
Please.
Just be yourself and you'll be fine. Everything will take care of itself. I was a teenager at my 6th form college, Wigeston, and Queen Elizabeth I College in Leicester, and my English teacher decided to give me some life advice. These words of hers sank into my soul like a dot, even if I didn't fully understand them at the time. She was the first person in my life to tell me, just be yourself. You don't need to try to be anyone else. In doing so, she was repeating exactly what Krishna had advised Arjuna on that clear early morning on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. From childhood, the media and advertising industries, our friends, and even our family have been telling us what it means to be successful. Many of us find ourselves unconsciously buying into a dream that is not our own, that doesn't accord with who we are. If we continually try to conform to the expectations of others, we never give ourselves the chance to manifest who we are meant to be. Everything in the universe is true to its nature, except for humans. An acorn pushes out an oak. It doesn't try to push out lilies. As an oak, it expresses its own perfection perfectly. But we easily embrace an idea of success that isn't our own and then allow that idea to direct our life. One of the strange secrets of life is that no matter how hard we try, we remain incomplete and unfulfilled until we're perfectly ourselves. When we express ourselves unreservedly, we become beautiful, not just in our own eyes, but in the eyes of everyone around us. To be beautiful means to be yourself. When we ignore the seed of potential within us and try to become something that we're not, we feel unfulfilled and frustrated. Awareness of the short duration of our life can give us the clarity and courage to put this principle into practice. Steve Jobs, the former CEO of Apple and Pixar, put it poignantly. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You're already naked. There's no reason to not follow your heart. Should I go on?
Yeah, please. We can just finish this section.
Death has a way of putting things into perspective, and the dark night of the soul is a type of death. Our story has been shattered. Past meaning has been lost. We're cast adrift. Often a person may fall into a dark night of the soul precisely because they've spent years hiding from themselves. They may have pursued other people's ideas of what they should be doing and have abandoned themselves. The dark night breaks down our story. It invites us to look at the areas in our life where we've abandoned ourselves in favor of an imaginary story. The first step, therefore, is to begin living in a way that is truer to our nature. We're invited to be more truthful. Living in accord with one's own nature is an act of self-kindness. How we're built is part of the universal order of things. Krishna, therefore, advises Arjuna to align himself with that universal order and use it to his advantage to undertake powerful and effective action. It's impossible to be effective or skillful in the field of life if we're locked in a fight against our own nature. Krishna's conclusion is really quite simple. Beings must follow their nature. What can repression accomplish? The universe has built each of us in a unique way. If we're engaged in a fight with the universe, guess who will win? The universe, always.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Avantika. We'll stop there. That quote, this last one from Krishna, beings must follow their nature. What can repression accomplish? That's in fact, again, in that section on the 3rd chapter, it's 3.33. And it's in that section of walk the path that's given to you. Even the wise act according to their natures, for all beings follow nature. What can repression accomplish? It reminds me of the quote that I heard many years ago, repression without expression leads to depression. And it was very easy to remember, and that's how I've remembered all these years. But yeah, anyone have any comments to share on anything that was read? Some really powerful points that were made here in this section. I mean, this whole section is really great.